Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Zoom Room. My name is Austin Render. It is Monday, June 1st, joined by Connor Hines here on our Unpaid Interns podcast. Connor, how are you doing today?
Doing just dandy, Austin. Good to see your smiling face again. We've got another another great show planned for everybody this afternoon. And yeah, we've got some stuff to get to, whether it be, in the IU media landscape or, nationally right now. On the sports front of things, at least, a little bit of progress is being made. And I think people are starting to at least be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, the NBA is making the biggest positive news right now. The MLB is clouding up our negative news, but we'll start with the positive. The NBA is looking at a possible 22-team format that would mix the NBA or the regular season of the NBA with the playoffs with 22 teams. What are your thoughts of this? Is that too many teams? Are they overthinking this?
I don't think it's too much at this point. It's hard to go wrong because everybody just wants sports back in some capacity. And as you and I talked about last week, I do think, the more we read and the more we hear about all these different proposals, I think the NHL plan makes a lot of sense, and the NBA sort of follows the NHL with this type of expanded playoff format as well. I think it makes sense considering the circumstances. Obviously, it's not what people want, but I mean, like we talked about last week with hockey, Austin, I think this could make for a much more intriguing, a seriously landmark, very memorable, 2020 postseason, whether it be for the NHL, for the NBA, or any other league, because it's just going to be that much different and that much more exciting, I think. We talked a little bit last week about how it makes sense to have a bit of an expanded playoff format, considering the amount of time these guys have had off. And I mean, to a certain extent, you need to get everybody back in basketball shape, get everybody back in, hockey shape. So I think it makes sense. The NBA, along with the NHL, are clearly giving us the most, reason to be hopeful right now.
Yeah, and I think it's the NBA wants its stars there. You're talking about Zion Williamson, who's right now, I believe they have the 8 seed. It might be Ja Morant in Memphis. I should know that since they haven't played a game in 2.5 months. But they want those stars there. They want Ja Morant. They want Zion Williamson. They want Damian Lillard and the Blazers in the mix because Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum are stars of this league. So not surprised that they're trying to include a few more teams.
Yeah, and the NBA has always been players first. And it's clear that in the past couple weeks, the league has listened to what the players want, not anything against any other, league trying to go through these same motions right now. But it's clear that the NBA wants to project a very specific positive image of itself, especially in, incredibly uncertain times in our country. And I think they're achieving that pretty well. They mirrored the NHL plan a little bit. And that was very appropriate considering the circumstances. But you're right. They want their stars back on the court. They want their fans, just like hockey. The fans are just so incredibly important in the NBA. And, they want it back just as bad as all of us.
Well, speaking of players wanting things, a former MLB player, Adrian Gonzalez, has come out and said he wouldn't put it past the MLB to go replacement players, a 40-man replacement roster of whoever they can find who will take these pay cuts and will go play baseball, because he says the fans want baseball. They don't care who it will be. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the replacement players. What did you make of seeing that headline?
I mean, I see what he's saying. You can't put much past baseball these days. I mean, it's such a anomaly, and it's just so out there in so many ways. I mean, we saw Jeff Passan's latest. We saw the new proposal that was sent from the Players Association back to the league, essentially a compromise of sorts. Obviously, the league is going to reject that plan, but I mean, you look into the details of these various proposals going back and forth between the Players Association and the league and so on and so forth. And it makes sense why you could see, a abnormal roster, to put it that way, for so many teams this year, just because there are going to be many players at the end of the day that hold back, that withdraw, for whatever reason it may be, whether it be, whether they be stubborn about, taking a pay cut. I certainly would be as well. There's a myriad of reasons why players are going to, offer and, abstain pretty much from playing their sport this year, whether it be, family reasons, not being able to take your family to the bubble, so on and so forth. There's so many different reasons why. But we've learned to expect the unexpected in the past few months here. So I think, any way at this point that you can get baseball back on the field, they're gonna work with the league to accomplish that. And that might involve, not seeing some of the guys we're used to seeing.
That would be quite a shock. Well, the last thing I want to get to before we get to Stefan here in just a minute, I want to talk about the Bundesliga, which has come back full force in Germany, but it's using fake crowd noise on FS1 for its games. Have you watched these? Do you think it's working? What do you think about fake crowd noise?
So I personally have not gotten to watch any Bundesliga yet, although I should and I will, especially with, I mean, we've got the Premier League coming back shortly. Soccer is getting in full swing. I have not watched any German soccer yet. I know you probably have. I've seen clips on Twitter of, the crowd noise and how that is working or not working right now. I think in theory, it's a really good idea. Obviously there's going to be kinks in the system that you've got to work out through these first couple weeks of using it. But I mean, at the end of the day, the players and coaches who are actually at the stadium, they don't care. Like, they don't hear any of that. Yeah. It's purely a fan experience thing. And, television production, they're advanced enough to be able to figure this stuff out. But I have seen, a few instances in which it's, either over exaggerated or under exaggerated, or you've got like the wrong crowd noise sound effect happening at the wrong time. And that all makes sense. But I mean, I certainly think it's still better than no crowd noise at all.
I would have to agree with that. Well, there's a lot of topics going on in sports. We cover a few of them there in the open, but it's time to get to our great plan that we have for this week. We're bringing in several members of the IU Media School, student media members who have dedicated a lot of time in the past couple of years to making the IU Media School what it is. It's really starting to blossom, and we want to take a week to appreciate that, appreciate the work that's going in from a lot of these guys. And our first very distinguished guest, he covers IU athletics for the Indy Star. He's a rising senior at IU, and he's also a huge Korean Baseball League fan, from what I understand. Let's welcome to the show, Stefan Krajisnik. Let me make sure I'm saying your last name right, because I've known you for 3 years. I don't think I've ever said it. Is it Krajisnik?
No, it's Krajisnik. No. The J kind of acts as a Y there.
I've never said your last name in 3 years of knowing you, so that is my bad.
You've known me for 3 years. I think this is the first time you've ever referred to me as distinguished too, so I'll take that.
That's what you get. You lead off the week here. You're a distinguished guest. I guess what's going on in your life right now? What's quarantine been like for you? I know this is a time where we should have been kicking off some big internships in the summer, but we're all sitting at home right now. What's it been like for you?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm on the same page as you guys. It's been tough the past couple months ever since things got canceled. I'm actually back in Bloomington for a little bit now. Got away from the family a little bit to spend some time on my own. And Bloomington's been awesome. I mean, you guys know what Bloomington is like, especially in the summer. If you guys have had the opportunity to be here in the summer, it's really nice. And yeah, as you mentioned in that intro, a lot of KBO baseball for me. The LG Twins are hot. They've been hot, and I have championship aspirations this year. So, if the MLB can't come to some kind of agreement, I'll be okay. Waking up and checking the score of the LG Twins when they're playing at 5:30 a.m.
So why the LG Twins? I mean, there are so many different, you had every KBO team at your disposal when you decided to pledge your allegiance to the LG Twins. I mean, why your squad? Why?
So whenever the KBO came back, and I can't even remember when it was. I mean, I think it was a month ago, maybe at this point.
Yeah.
Whenever the KBO decided to return, you guys know Michael Dugan, an IU alum, and he kind of sent a text in his group chat with me, Jack Grossman, and Cam Drummond, and was like, "Hey, there's a KBO game on." It's like it was one of those like 1 a.m. first pitches. So it was like one of the weekend games, and he was like, the LG Twins are playing today, and we're just gonna root for this team. We were like, all right, we're like, screw it, let's just root for the LG Twins. Like, why not? So we watched this game, and I kid you not, and maybe you guys saw this on Twitter. I kid you not. I believe it was 6 or 7 runs that they gave up in the first inning. Like, we're down 6 or 7, like right away. Like, and they have some Casey Kelly was out there. He's an American pitcher, so it was like this whole thing, like American pitcher on the mound. The game's on ESPN. I'm like, we got this. We're down to like 7-0 in the first. I'm like, well, this is not going anywhere near as planned. This is exactly how my baseball fandom has been going for with the exception of 2005 White Sox. This is usually how my baseball fandom goes. And they ended up coming back and winning that game. And ever since then, they've been really hot. They're 2 games back of first right now. And I've just been riding with the Twins, which is totally against me because I'm a White Sox fan. So I don't really like the Minnesota Twins. But the LG Twins are my team, and we're all in right now.
All in on the LG Twins. What's the other one that's in your Twitter bio?
That's Borussia Mönchengladbach of the Bundesliga. They're third right now.
Okay.
And I was thinking we get off to a hot start. We had a tough game the other day against a team towards the bottom whose name I can't remember. But as long as we finish in the top 4, we're eligible for the Premier League. So
there you go.
It was one of the tougher names to pronounce. It's a lot tougher than LG Twins, but
yeah, I didn't even want to try that one when I saw it in your Twitter bio. What else?
Go ahead.
You've got your new podcast out, Central Time. What else are you kind of doing to kind of kill your time? I'll give you a second here to even plug your pod if you want to. But just kind of talk to us about what you've been doing.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Central Time Pod has kind of been going on between me, Cam Drummond, Dylan Wallace. We all live in Central Time, so that's just kind of where that started from. And then there's nothing better than a 7 p.m. kickoff as opposed to an 8 p.m. kickoff. So Central Time is just great, and I do advise people that are listening to go listen to Central Time as well. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, a whole lot of Netflix binging. I've been watching Ozark recently. I watched All American. People have been telling me to watch Outer Banks, so that's next on the list. I'm doing just about what everyone else is doing. Thankfully, the golf courses have been able to open up, so I've been doing a lot of golf, and I don't really want to talk too much about my golf game. The ball goes far, but it doesn't really go straight all the time. So the golf game will improve hopefully by the end of the summer. But yeah, man, anything you can do to kill the time. I mean, whether it be reading a book or watching Netflix, or if you're taking part in protests or whatever you may be doing right now, if it's helping a good cause, or if it's helping you kill time or whatever it may be, I advise you to do it and find a new hobby. I mean, you guys might have seen on Twitter, I haven't done too much reading the past few years, especially, it's tough to balance school and work and find time to open up a book. But, I read a couple books these past few months, and, you can find a lot of new things. So try to find the silver lining and having some time away from usually a hectic schedule.
Steph, you've been doing some writing for the Indy Star during this time as well. I mean, we talked to a couple journalists last week as well. What are the challenges of finding a good, productive story that, not only can, attract an audience, but is unique and different on top of everything else that's going on right now? I know you've been doing some writing along Zach Osterman for the Indy Star for a while now. So you've certainly got some experience under your belt writing for the Star, but it's got to be a challenge now with, such a limited amount of resources, really.
Yeah, I mean, and as we talk about a lot, as journalists, your key part of when you're doing a story is you're looking for some kind of timeliness or some kind of plug to make this story relevant whenever you want to publish or whenever you want to work on it. And it's really hard when there's no sports going on to find, a reason to publish something. And we've done a lot of work, thankfully IU football has been really open in terms of having Zoom meetings each week. And, you write as in anticipation of the season starting when it's supposed to start in August or September. And aside from that, I mean, you're looking for feature stories of athletes that have done something this past year or have an interesting story because it's an escape for people, especially in a time like this, to find some kind of story. And I published a story a few weeks ago on a little five racer whose brother died her freshman year. I mean, he'd overdosed from drug use, and I did a story on totally blanking now. Oh, I did a story on like IU athletes like battling mental health and what IU is putting in place for them. And this is stuff that maybe seems irrelevant in the grand scheme of things of COVID pandemic that's going on and everything that's been going on this past weekend. But it's still an escape for people, and there's still the hope of sports coming back. There's still the fact that these stories, while they are from the past, they still did happen and they still can be interesting. And then you kind of find that plug where the story with the little five racer, the race was canceled this year. And that's something that meant a lot for her. And that ties into the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I know people don't want to talk too much about the pandemic, but at the same time, you're giving them an outlet, and you're telling them the story, and you're saying, hey, I know this pandemic is really annoying and you're sick of hearing about it in, on TV or in newspapers, something like that. But, it's affecting a lot of people's lives in different ways. And I think just finding how this affects people in different ways can end up being how you find your stories. But it has been difficult. It has been difficult. And I know people, it's tough to get people to talk now too, because everyone's kind of just we're all in this mood where we don't want to talk to anyone. We're lonely, but we don't want to talk to people, and everyone's cranky, and you're trying to find stories, but people are like, well, I don't feel like telling my story now. So you try to work around that, but there are stories to tell, and just like before the pandemic, you got to do your best to find them.
Well, you're a rising senior now. I know that's probably crazy to hear. It is for me, at least, when it is told to me. You've covered IU athletics now for 3 years. If you were going to give advice or maybe talk to a younger college person or somebody coming into their freshman year, how do you go about, as a student media member, gaining the respect and the trust of others like a Zach Osterman, like a John Blau, the people who cover this for a living? How do you kind of get their respect as just this college student who's 19, 20 years old?
Well, yeah, I'm still working on getting the respect from Zach and Blau. I don't know if I'm there yet. So I'm still working on that. But if you're trying to gain the respect of Zach, I would recommend probably watching a lot of Premier League soccer and talking to him about that. But no, all jokes aside, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're coming in as a freshman, I think the number one thing is just to understand that, regardless of what you're doing, take your job seriously. I mean, my freshman year, I covered IU men's and women's golf, and I really enjoyed that beat because I feel like I took that beat pretty seriously. And I know, covering the golf team isn't nearly as exciting as covering the football team or the men's basketball team. And I get that, but you can't expect coming in as a freshman that you're automatically going to do that. And now, there are exceptions, and I'm not saying that, freshmen are not capable of doing something like that, which they are. But you just need to understand that that's kind of how the totem pole goes, especially when you get to IU, and whether you're doing, the Hoosier Network or IDS or IUS TV, whatever you may be doing, you kind of just got to work your way up that totem pole. And I think there's a lot of people that are capable of doing that. But as long as you do that, as long as you take your job seriously, you're going to gain that respect. If you're going and you're doing the field hockey beat and you're asking good questions and you're asking tough questions, if there's a circumstance going on where you require asking tough questions, I mean, people are going to take you seriously on that beat. And then when you get up there, when you do get to cover the footballs, the basketballs of the world, you're going to have that experience, and you're not going to be afraid to ask Archie Miller or Tom Allen a question because you've been asking all these coaches these other questions throughout the years, and you built up this knowledge that you have from another beat that you can use on those bigger beats. And that's how you gain the respect of those guys that you work with. I mean, if they see that you're not there to mess around and you're not there to just, quote out or tweet some quote completely out of context to kind of get clicks or get retweets or something like that. I mean, if you're there to get good stories, to report on what's actually going on, to write good feature stories, to write good, game recaps or sidebars or whatever it may be doing, that's how you're going to get the respect. I mean, these guys like Zach and guys like John have been around long enough to know which students take it seriously and which students don't. And they notice that stuff. They might not come up to you, they're not going to give you a pat on the back and say, hey, you're doing a good job. But they notice that kind of stuff, and that sticks out. So you build those relationships, and then hopefully down the road you have good, recommendations and good people to put on your resume and good jobs to put on your resume. So whatever you're doing when you come in freshman year, just take it seriously, and it's going to go a long ways for you.
With all three of us, we've all heard through our time at IU that, student journalism, media in general, it's very, outside the classroom oriented. Everything you're doing is extracurricular. It's always, outside the classroom. That's what matters, getting hands-on experience. I know when I was on the softball beat as a freshman, it was just a little challenging at first to just sort of balance the dynamic and, find out where your priorities lay, whether it be, studying for an exam or whether you want to work on this, story you're really excited about. How did you as a freshman, and how have you sort of evolved from that? How have you sort of, balanced those priorities and, taking the onus on yourself to be like, okay, this is a story I'm really trying to pursue here. This is going to be my priority for the next week or however long it is.
Yeah, well, I'll tell a story a little bit. My freshman year, when I was covering the golf team, and I can't remember if it was the women's or men's team that this happened with, but I basically skipped the class to go do an interview. And after the interview, like the interview went well, I was pretty excited about the story, and I called my mom and I was telling her, and it was like maybe like a Monday or Tuesday. She's like, "Well, did you go to class today?" And I was like, "Oh, like I had a class this morning, but I skipped it. Like, I have a friend in class, like they'll send me the notes or something like that." And she like freaked. She was like, "We didn't send you to school so you could skip class. Like we sent you there so you could go to your classes, and then the IDS stuff that's on the back burner. Like you'll get to that." So after that, I didn't tell my parents. I mean, imagine, man, if I had to tell them all this classes I've skipped for press conferences and stuff like that, because it is tough. It is tough, and when you come in as a freshman, you're trying to balance your priorities. But the good thing about the IU Media School, and I mean, other classes I've taken outside the media school, but especially with the media school, is that the professors understand. Like they know the best way to gain experience, whether it be in journalism or broadcast or whatever you may be doing, is to just go out and do it. And I'm so glad that so many professors are understanding of that. And Austin and I had a couple classes last year and this year with Zach Kiefer. I mean, he's the peak of understanding that the best way to do it is to just go out and do it. The best way to learn is to go out and do it. And it is tough as a freshman to balance all that out. But I think you just need to understand that if you're serious about this and you want to do this, you might have to skip class every now and then. But you're not going to have to skip an exam. You're not going to have to take a 0 on an exam. Like there's ways to work around it. And especially if you can build a relationship with your SIDs and be like, "Hey, I really want to do this interview, but this time that you have said athlete available, I have an exam." And they'll understand. I mean, you're student first and you're journalist second, but as long as you take it seriously, you can balance all that out. You'll find a way to work around it. And I know it's tough when you first come in, because it was tough for me. I mean, Connor, like you mentioned, covering the softball team, I covered the baseball team my freshman year. I mean, when there's 4 games going on each week and Monday availability and a third or a Wednesday midweek, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to balance it out. But you can do it. And if you're worried about that as a freshman coming in, I strongly encourage you to just keep pushing, keep participating in as much as you want to participate in. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't feel like you have to do too much. But I recommend that you take part in as much as you can, because you'd be surprised how much you can balance.
Some great wisdom here from Stefan in our first 15 minutes. Let's spend the final 5 talking about the beat that you're covering, the football team. What are the expectations for the football team this upcoming season, if it happens? Is this another one of those seasons that could be like last year? It feels like the schedule kind of sets up for that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to IU football, if everything goes as planned, if they play their non-conference, like let's just pretend there's no corona going on. Let's pretend everything's great, which I feel like I like to do a lot of the times, is just pretend everything's fine.
Of course.
The non-conference, you're probably gonna win all 3. I mean, you should win all 3. And then, like you mentioned, the Big Ten slate that you get for a team that's in the Big Ten East, you kind of have an easier schedule than you can usually get. I think Illinois you can beat, Michigan State you can beat. I would really look at this season as, definitely something like last year. We could win 8 games, or dare I say 9 games or something like that. It's hard. It's scary to be the guy on the beat that sets high expectations, because it's so quick in December when someone's like, Indiana won 4 games and this fool said they were going to win 8. So you always hesitate to be optimistic when it comes to IU football. But no, I think they've got a good returning core in place, and the expectations that come as a result of last year, I think, are very reasonable. I think setting expectations at 8 or more wins and having a higher level bowl game is very reasonable for this team. And I think, if anyone benefits from having an inside hire for a new offensive coordinator during a time like this, it's Indiana, because, I can only imagine what it would be like if they had another new offensive coordinator this year that completely came from outside the program and you can't even be with him for the entire spring. So I think, with what they return, they can do a lot, and the expectations can be high. So for the IU fans that are really hesitant about setting high expectations, I think it's okay. I think you can do it. I think you'll be okay with high expectations. And I just kind of want to add on that real quick. The stuff that came out this week, and Tom Allen speaking out, and various athletes. I know Watt Phillier has spoken out a ton, and he's just one example of many. It seems like Tom Allen really does understand his players, at least from that sense, and isn't afraid to speak out on their behalf. And I think that just kind of shows that this whole thing we keep hearing about Elio and all this and all that, it really is something that kind of means a lot to this program, and they are taking it seriously. And, I hate to tie something like this into a football season, but if it shows that, teams that close and they have some kind of chemistry and they relate on a personal level, that helps a lot too. So, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, but I think, high expectations can be reasonable for this team.
Do you have, before we let you go, do you have a specific memory? You've covered a lot of games for 3 years. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you have a specific memory that is like one of your favorite moments that you got to cover, a great quote, a great game, a great moment, something that's happened in your 3 years?
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind was earlier this year during the basketball season, the Red Steppers did a whole like TikTok compilation dance during halftime of a basketball game. So that was really great personally, and they started with Renegade, which was incredible. But from the games I've actually covered, my freshman year, the baseball team played against Ball State in a midweek, and I think it went 15 innings, maybe 16 innings.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it was like a 5.5-hour game, and it was just brutal, man. Like I'm telling you, like
it was freezing too.
It was freezing.
Yeah.
It was oh man, I'll never forget covering that game. And I think I worked with Cam covering the baseball team that year, and I think he still has the box score with him somewhere. I mean, this game, like, I don't remember the last time I'd been at a baseball. I don't know if I've ever been at a baseball game that went that long. And afterwards, we got a really good quote talking to Chris Lamonis. He said something like, I'm just happy the game ended because I'm so hungry right now, or something like that. So, which I feel like a lot of people probably related to. So I think from the games that I've gotten to cover myself, that's the first one that comes to mind, at least, and just something that I'll probably never forget covering. And I don't know if it's ever going to happen again.
I can't believe the Red Steppers was the first thing that came in your mind when I said, give me a moment. Give me a moment. He goes with the Red Steppers. TikTok.
Well, because it's rare. It's rare that you can get a journalist to kind of start dancing a little bit in the press box area, but it happened, man. It was hard.
I missed this. I don't think I got to see this.
I'm sure there's video of it somewhere. I think Matt Cohen has video of it. So there's that. To the people that really want to see that.
If anyone has it, it's Cohen.
Yeah, exactly. But TikTok is good. More TikTok is better.
Well, more Stefan is better. We appreciate you coming on the show with us. A great insight onto what it's like to be a student media member, and we really appreciate your time. Best of luck here, and hopefully we'll see you in the fall.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. And I know Drew's coming on next, so you can ask him about his karaoke performances in London. I'll leave you on that.
Oh boy, I didn't even know about this. All right, thanks, Stefan. You've given us some ammo here.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Steph.
Later. Oh man, Stefan loading us up here as we bring in, as he mentioned, the next guest here on our show. It is the IUS TV sports director, host of the Toss Up. He is also a rising senior and apparently a karaoke star. Drew Frey joining us. Drew,
I can't believe he gave that to you. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have some words with him. But yes, yeah, I don't. We
have to start off with that.
We'll see. I don't believe he mentioned he had a riveting performance at Party in the USA, which was great to hear from across the pond, as we were like a few Americans, and he's singing about the United States. But yeah, I enjoy singing. I can't sing, so when it's in a secluded when we're in a secluded place in a country that I probably won't be back to for several years and people I will never see again, I guess that's the opportunity that I took.
What were the songs? What did you bust out?
Oh gosh, this is We did. I did try a little bit of Bon Jovi
Okay.
because I was feeling bold, and I really like most of the Bon Jovi songs. Cannot hit those notes, and I didn't know that my voice could still crack at this age, but it does. When I try that, and I guess the one that Steph really wanted to bring up was, um, there's a list of like songs that there's a guy with a guitar, he could do like 30 songs, and one of them was Barbie Girl, and I could not just let that go.
You had to let the
Um,
guy do Barbie Girl on his
I
guitar.
did.
Yeah.
I did. So unfortunately Steph has video of that as well.
Well, that's not the note I thought we would start this interview off with, but
Yeah, that's really not what I planned on, but
that was great. Let's move to less embarrassing things for Drew here.
yeah,
This
great
is
way to
this
get
is a
started.
this is a time, April, May, even March, when we left school, that you're supposed to be back at IU covering sports. That didn't happen. What have you kind of been filling your time with in the past couple of months?
Um, I mean, overall, I'm just trying to sort of get my bearings, where we all with where we all are with this right now, and just trying to get more organized. Maybe as I go into this, will be my last semester. This fall will. So I'm just trying to get everything ready. I've seen a lot of my friends, a lot of people in student media who are going out and just getting jobs right now in the current environment we're in, and I can't imagine the stress that they're under. So I'm trying to get prepared with that. I'm just trying to stay in a sort of sports talking mood. So Jackson, Kinney, and I will both be the iOS TV sports directors this upcoming fall, and so we've launched a show called Director's Cut, and we just basically pick whatever sports topic we can find for the week. We do it twice a week. It airs Wednesdays and Fridays, and so we've been trying to keep ourselves busy with that. Make sure that we don't, lose the edge or any sort of interest in sports, and be able to just follow everything that's going on.
It's pretty difficult to talk about sports when there are no sports on. And Austin and I have had this conversation a couple times already. We've talked about it a lot on this Unpaid Interns show. I mean, just checking in with you, Drew. Are you doing okay with no sports? How are you passing the time? You just mentioned your show that you and Jackson are working on, but I mean, at a certain extent, I mean, it's got to be difficult. I mean, you run out of things to talk about at a certain point.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been lucky. I've been fine. Mentally, I haven't had any issues, which I know is more than some other people can say. So I'm grateful for that. I think the biggest thing is I've just sort of expanded what sort of sports that I'm now watching. I never thought that there would be a day where I would sit down and watch the American Cornhole League, but I have seen several matchups there. They've been doing social distancing really well. That's been interesting. I've watched a lot more NASCAR, which was something that I was really into when I was younger, and sort of that faded away. So now that NASCAR is sort of back in full force and one of the few live events going on, I've been able to get back into that once again. Um, I saw last night, I saw professional cliff diving on TV. So I had to watch some of that. Um, so yeah, I'm just sort of trying to like expand what I'm able to see, and then there's a few small things that come up, um, whether it be documentaries or like coverage of different players, different sports. I know in tennis there have been a couple like localized tournaments. There's a group of Americans who have a buddy who has like a private court in his backyard in Florida. So they just basically hosted a tournament where there's only like 3 people there at all times. They don't touch each other's tennis balls. They don't, shake hands or anything. And so they've been very on top of like being safe down there, but it's still able to like give some sort of tournament, even if it's just like a round robin between 4 guys.
Yeah, we're all trying to find new ways to, I guess, enjoy sports. I know the Korean Baseball League has been a big thing. Bundesliga coming back. You mentioned NASCAR. Let's kind of transition to when there were sports, and you've covered IU sports for 3 years now. How do you go about, as a student, gaining the respect of your peers, gaining the respect of the SIDs, the coaches, the adults who do this for a living? What's kind of your your take on that, and how over the 3 years do you feel you've gained the respect of the people around you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think, I mean, a lot of it is just sort of, I'm going to try and avoid like being cheesy with like any sort of, response there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just showing up to events and showing that you do care. Um, I know, with SIDs, the very first event that I attended where I was like interacting with an SID was a swimming and diving meet. And I had no idea like what was going on from a media standpoint. This is my freshman year. And so, I was reached out to Scott Burns, who was the SID for swim and dive at the time. And he was a great help, but I still remember, I even felt like sort of like the wide-eyed freshman. But I was very much like, I was honest with him, like, here's where I'm at. Let me know anything I need to do. Gave me advice. And at the end of the meet, he's like, all right, who do you want to talk to? And I'm just like, well, I probably want to talk to the coach, maybe a couple of players. And by the end of it, he just sort of walked over and he's like, okay, I think Lily's got time. You want Lily? And I'm just like, you mean Lily King? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll just bring her over. And I was like, okay, then here we go. And I didn't know what to like say to, I mean, for me, I'm still like, I just got to IU and now I'm sitting here being like, this is Lily King. But I tried to sort of lock it down, ask her questions about the meet, get her talking, and just like treat it like this was my job, And moving on, I've tried to sort of maintain that professionalism and just really show, especially with some smaller, less covered sports, something outside of football and basketball. I've noticed the team, the players, the coaches, the SIDs, they care if they know that you want to be there. And that's something that I've had because, I mean, I mentioned it already, but like I'm a big tennis fan. And so I was just showing up to some tennis matches. And I remember talking to one of the assistant coaches and he was just asking like why I was there. And I'm just like, oh, I love tennis. I figured I'd be at a lot of these matches anyways. I want to be able to cover the team. And he sort of made a comment. He's like, yeah, most of the people we get are just sort of like, this is assigned as like their fifth choice. So like, it was nice to see that. And then I feel like I've been able to bond with a few of the coaches and I've known some of the SIDs there. So I think a lot of it, and this is just what goes to make people, good at what they do anyways, is having that passion and being able to show that like I'm also here for the team. And I think that's a lot of SIDs view media as potential problems. And so sort of establishing yourself as someone who's there to help and to help share the story, I think goes a long way.
Sort of playing off of that, you mentioned tennis. You've done a little bit of everything with your time, with IUS TV or whatever else it may be, but you've sort of latched onto tennis in the same way I think I latched onto softball as a freshman when I was on the softball beat with IUS TV during the spring of my freshman year. How did you go about, I mean, you mentioned just sort of showing up to matches and just sort of latching onto that team. And, at least in my experience with softball, it's been so easy and so enjoyable just to be able to form a connection with a team, especially one that, isn't football, isn't basketball, one who really appreciates, your time and energy and coverage that you put into that sport. I mean, how'd you go about establishing that relationship? And I mean, at this point, now going into your senior year, I mean, you are the tennis guy.
Yeah, I guess it sort of landed that way. And I think a big thing is I'm not trying to like show up and force myself into being like close friends with any particular players on the team. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I am. I definitely respect all the members of the men's and the women's teams, and I feel like most of them at this point would recognize me. But I think it's sort of having that understanding of like, I'm here with my role as media and I will continue to be here. And I think it's, not only like just showing up to a few matches, but sort of establishing that like whenever you guys play a home game, I will be part of that home environment. And then also I think people really do value creativity. And this also sort of goes into the caring because at the end of the day, with any sport, you can go in, you can get a few highlights, bail early, cut a recap package, or maybe just like show up late and grab your interviews and then just, post something and you're done. But like whenever I'll get like a list of ideas going, and I'll go, go to the SID or one of the coaches, be like, "Are you interested in this? Is this a possibility?" And well, I don't want to overwhelm them. I think it does show that I'm there for the long haul, and that I also want to be able to, allow them to have some fun and allow them to sort of express themselves. And so yeah, I definitely think that goes a long way as well, because then I'm no longer just like that random spectator that sits and watches the games but like doesn't cheer, because that's technically not my role, and it's a really fine line to walk, and that's always fun. um but I'm also not there to just like be in their hair and bother them.
Yeah, that's a fine line that we all learn as we go through our years. If we're talking about, let's stay on the tennis team. The spring sports got a kind of an interesting situation. Obviously, disappointing to not get their seasons, to not get the results. But for the seniors, they get to come back if they want to. They have the option for the waiver. What have you seen or heard from the tennis teams, how that might impact next season, and maybe who was thinking and if they're going to get some players back?
Yeah, I know several players have definitely expressed interest in coming back. I don't know if any of them have like officially confirmed they'll be back for another year or confirmed that they're leaving. I know with several players, like Michelle McCamey on the women's team, she's going into grad school at IU, and originally was just planning on dropping tennis altogether to focus on that, and is now reevaluating whether she can use, because she'll have 2 more years of eligibility since she was graduating as an undergrad a year early. So she was, trying to figure out if she can balance that. Paya Mamadi on the men's team, I believe, is looking into going into law school, and that might be difficult for him to maintain tennis as he's going through a law program. One of the big things with the seniors, though, is the extra year of eligibility really does like help if they want to return, but it's going to be a matter of continuing their collegiate career at IU and taking classes. I know that Bennett Crane at one point mentioned that he was planning on just graduating next fall, because he would be done with his course load by then, and he'd leave. So I don't know if maybe there will be, if you're in that situation, if you want to add, a minor, if you want to take some extra classes, that's where a lot of it will get interesting. And then I know Coach Askley on the women's side said, obviously this could affect some players' decisions this year, but it'll be interesting to see as they get down the line, as some of these, as the juniors or even some of the freshmen, if they choose to use extra years of eligibility going forward, because they also lost their season. It just so happened that it wasn't their last season. And then I think the big thing is when it comes to recruiting, both coaches have already done a ton of recruiting to replace already large senior classes. On the men's team in particular, they're losing, almost half of their entire doubles lineup and the top 2 spots of their singles lineup, or they were at least planning on losing that. So they have a large recruiting class coming in to replace that large group that they were planning on losing. So now a tennis team, which might be anywhere from 8 to 12 members, could be somewhere between like 12 and 16.
Yeah, I talked to Cal Kruger, the baseball team, and he said he's not coming back. He loved his 4 years, but he's ready to move on and move into the business world, and you can't fault him for that whatsoever. He just got engaged. He's ready to move on with his life. And he also said, if everybody takes that year, there's going to be a lot of people vying for the same amount of spots in the starting lineup and the same amount of spots in the bullpen. And obviously for tennis, the same amount of doubles and singles spots, just more people vying for them. So it's going to be less playing time. It's going to be more competitive. So that's something that's interesting with that waiver. What is the outlook on the tennis teams, though? It feels like they were starting to show some improvement there from what I got from some of your packages and your features. Where's the tennis teams at right now?
Yeah, both teams were definitely showing signs of improvement. The women's team was in an interesting situation where they had one junior, but everyone else was either a freshman or a senior. So it was a very, top-heavy team from that standpoint, and a ton of room to grow, as several top players and lead contributors were freshmen, and first-year players. So, I mean, there's still a lot of room to grow, and depending on who comes back, they might have more experience. I think this is definitely a team that can grow a lot over the next 3 years. The men's team, it's really a shame what happened to their season, because I think they were in the best position that they've ever been since I've been following, since Coach Wartzman had came to the program. The team still hasn't made an NCAA tournament, although they have competed in the Big Ten tournament a few times. And I think this team really had a shot at an NCAA. I think they were on the inside, on that bubble of making the NCAA tournament, and that was with a very strong group of seniors. So I think depending on who ends up leaving the program, I do think that the men's team will take a decent sized hit, because this was really the group that I think was going to be able to break through. Now they do have a great recruiting class coming in. They've consistently been able to recruit well. Still several young players that can step up. But I think this was the year that they really had the best shot. They'd already taken down, a top 25 Dartmouth team. They were undefeated at home, and their only losses was they lost to Texas, who was number 1 at the time, and that was on the road, in hostile territory. So I definitely think there was a lot of potential with this team, and there will be in the future. But I think IU is one of those teams that really got hit hard because they were peaking at the right time.
Well, we left Stefan with the last question. I'll do it with you as well. If you've been covering IU for 3 years, is there a moment, a press conference, a game that stands out to you that was crazy that you were a part of, that was just shocking, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few that I'm trying to think of off the top of my head, but the one I definitely have to go with is I had some great experiences with the football team. I was IUS TV football reporter last fall, and I got to travel a little bit with them. Went down to Jacksonville, went up to Penn State, which were fun trips. But I think the one that was the craziest for me, and that I ended up having the most fun, had to be the Purdue game. When IU travels on the road to Purdue, I went up to Purdue as well. It wasn't a bad drive, but it was cold and it was raining. And normally these don't make, these aren't the tenets of a great memory. But I was freezing. I didn't have a camera cover, so I had taken a garbage bag and cut holes in it so that I could wrap up the camera and try and protect it that way. And yeah, I was out there covering in possibly the most hostile territory that IU football could play in. And it was an incredible game. IU went up big early. Of course, Purdue ended up coming back, and the game went into overtime. And I remember thinking, it was double overtime, I believe. And I remember thinking, as the game was ending, I just really wanted IU to win. Selfishly, I wanted IU to win, but mainly because IU had the chance to win, and my toes were starting to hurt from the cold. So eventually we go into that first overtime, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to freeze to death out here. But it was still a really fun experience. And then I remember as we end the first overtime and head into the second overtime, I sort of sat there and I thought, you know what? Can't feel my toes anymore. At this point, let's keep going. Let's go like that LSU game from a few years ago. Let's go 7 overtimes. At this point, what's the difference if I can't feel my toes anyways? And then IU ended up winning that in a double overtime. And, they got to rush onto the field, grab the bucket, carry off the trophy. And I just got to be in the middle of that celebration. And I thought that was so much fun. I was just there with my camera and a bunch of other reporters. At one point, Wap Fillier ran up to me and headbutted my camera. That was probably the highlight of, he comes up. I don't know if he recognized me specifically because I'd worked with him in the past, or if he just saw a camera and was just really happy. But yeah, he walks up to the camera and he starts yelling at it and he says, stop playing with us. You guys got to stop playing with us. Sort of saying we're underrated, we're ready now. And yeah, he runs up and he headbutts my cameras. He's yelling, stop playing with us. And he runs off. And I mean, there was a bunch of other celebrations. But then we get into that locker room and we could not hear the Tom Allen press conference because of the celebration that was going on by all of the IU players. But at that point, that was such a fun experience to just be down there on the field and be able to experience that emotion. And I just had a great time. And update, I can feel my toes now. So
okay, good.
feeling has been restored.
Well, yeah, I remember that was the game where WAP after the game said, "We the real trains," or something like that. That was
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes from WAP, who is a great quote. You never know
Oh
what you're
yeah.
gonna get from WAP. But that was a great game, good memory, good pick. You didn't pick the Red Steppers, so
I
honestly,
didn't.
better than Stefan.
I heard
Um,
that. I was listening and I heard him say Red Steppers. I'm like, okay, where's he going with this one?
Nothing wrong with the Red Steppers, but I feel like
I
you've
will
covered a
say,
lot of great events.
yeah, I will say, going off of the whole Red Steppers thing, is one of my favorite parts of any football game or any basketball game is going into the under 8 timeout in basketball and going into the fourth quarter in football games. It's, I believe the song's called like the William Tell Overture.
Yes. Yep.
But when they run out with all the flags, and I just, IU could be getting blown out. I don't care. That is the most fun part of any game, when you just get that whole atmosphere going up again.
Most famous timeout in basketball right there with the
Oh yeah.
William Tell. Well, thanks, Drew, for joining us. Best of luck this summer. We'll hopefully
Thank you.
see you in the fall and hopefully have some sports to cover. But appreciate you shedding some light on what it's like to be a student media member and the tennis guy. So
Yeah,
thanks
of
for
course.
stopping
Thanks for
by.
having me.
All
Thanks,
right.
Drew.
Thanks, Drew. Good guests again today here, Connor. Really, really fun episode. I really was. We learned a lot from both guys, and what are your takeaways from today?
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, a couple things that Drew touched on that were really interesting. And I have firsthand experience with this, having, covered the softball team, you having been on the road for a couple weekends with baseball this spring when everything got shut down. Indiana spring athletes, IU spring athletes really find themselves in a unique position right now, because as I found out through a little bit of storytelling that I did with the softball team, Indiana is almost an exception to the rule here. There are, the majority of Division I universities are not offering all spring athletes an additional year to come back. And, Indiana athletes are incredibly fortunate to have that opportunity. And, all 4 seniors from the softball team have decided to make a, joint return in 2021. They're calling it the victory lap. They're all going to come back together. And as a result, the team's going to be really stacked, as Drew was sort of alluding to there, with a couple different, situations for spring teams. And, it's such an interesting situation, because I know Bella Norton, who's going to be the senior catcher for IU in the spring of next year, she had a job lined up and pretty much pulled out of it. I mean, she had post-college, postgraduate plans put together, but she's going to come back and she wants to play another year of softball. So that's been a really, interesting story to follow. Incredibly tough decisions being made by, college students essentially, about their futures. And I mean, you talked about Cal Kruger there. I mean, there's no easy decision. There's no easy answer here. Of course, I'm excited that everybody's coming back for softball in the spring, but it's just crazy, first of all, that, not every Big Ten university, not every D1 university is extending this offer in the first place. And then if you do have the offer, you've got a gigantic decision to make.
Yep. Well, that was a big thing from Drew. I took away from Stefan that he had some really good advice for freshmen who are trying to make it, trying to gain the respect of people and trying to balance schoolwork and the student media aspect of it. It's all about being there. It's about showing up. It's about caring and asking the questions. And I love what he talked about with his golf beat. I mean, you started on what was your first beat? It wasn't
did
softball.
not.
You had one before that, right?
Did I have a beat in the fall? I don't think I had a beat in the fall. I remember doing WIUX for sure. My first like student media event was calling a early season men's soccer game on WIUX.
You and I did one together, didn't we? We did one freshman year together. That was where I first met you.
We definitely did. That might have been the big Michigan State game towards the end of the season. Was that
We
our
did
first?
that was our second game together.
Was it?
When we did the Elite Eight Michigan
I
State
think you're
game.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely did one before too. But no, the softball team was my first beat in the spring
Okay.
for IUSTV.
And mine was field hockey. And I learned a lot from that year being with
Yeah.
field hockey. And obviously, it's not football, it's not basketball, but like Stefan said, you create a relationship with the SID, with the coaching staff. And most importantly, you get one-on-one reps with these players and these coaches to ask questions.
Priceless.
It's unprecedented access that
Awesome.
you'll never get in some of these other sports as a student, at least. So I totally agree with Stefan. Taking that first beat seriously and utilizing the fact that you get to call and get to cover a sport. And then I got to do women's basketball, and that was what I've kind of stuck with. That's your softball in a way. I love covering the women's basketball team. That was my second beat. So I would give the same advice that Stefan did. Take that first beat and run with it. Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to IU, just very recent graduate, Mary Kate Hamilton, placing 4th in the Jim Nance Award. Extremely deserved. We've worked with her, Connor, for 3 years now. She's fantastic. Somebody hire her because she's awesome. Really happy for her and putting IU on the map there, getting 4th in the Jim Nance Award. So congratulations to her and all of her hard work kind of paying off there.
No, that was awesome. I was watching the broadcast. They actually broadcast the ceremony this year on CBS Sports HQ, I want to say it was. I mean, I was shocked in the best way possible to see IU up there at the top. I mean, that was awesome to see. Congratulations to Mary Kate, incredibly well deserved, and congratulations to you, sir. Austin Render named one of the honorable mentions this year in the Jim Nance Award competition, along with Casey Roll. Plenty of Indiana flavor this year in the STAA ranks. So that was awesome to see. Only better things ahead for us.
Yep, IU starting to get up there. Obviously not to the level of some schools, but really happy to see Mary Kate get
right
up there, get 4th. So really happy for her. Somebody hire her, please. And obviously with everything going on, just want to leave everybody with the message of love, care. I mean, care for everybody, love everybody. There's a lot going on in our country right now. Show somebody, do something good for somebody today. Do something good, and let's spread some love and some cheer in a country that really needs it right now. So Connor, thanks for joining us. Thanks to Stefan and Drew for joining us. We continue Student Appreciation Week on Wednesday. We have Matt Cohen and Haley Jordan joining us, and I will be joined by Tamar Scher as we walk through more lives of student media members at Indiana. It's not Matt Cohen, it's Jared Rigdon. I said it wrong. So it's Rigdon. Jared Rigdon will talk a little IU soccer, and the Haley Jordan going to talk some IU football as well. And then Matt Cohen and the great Dr. Galen Clavio will join us on Friday along with Griffin Gonzalez. So a stacked lineup of student media members from IU this week. So make sure to stay tuned with us. Same time on Wednesday. For Stefan and Drew and Connor, I'm Austin Render saying so long from Unpaid Interns.